Candace Owens hated Charlie Kirk. And I was surprised to hear this, but I received a tip. Several prominent conservatives have confirmed to me and my crew that Candace Owens had been going around shortly before he died, within the months before his death, saying that she hated him.
If politics is chess, then internet politics is chess played on a trampoline during an earthquake while somebody's live streaming their feelings. Because Candace Owens just dropped real details about Tim Pool drama, and the way this spiraled is a masterclass in how online movements don't break apart with policy disagreements. They break apart with podcast clips and hurt feelings. So here's what we're doing today. We're breaking down the 10 biggest tells in this Candace Owens versus Tim Pool mess. What was said, why it hit so hard, and what it reveals about power, audiences, and the outrage economy. And yes, there's a hilarious twist in the middle where someone basically explains, if you insult her viewers, you just insulted your viewers. Alright, seatbelt on. Let's go. Candace Owens frames this whole moment like an incoming blame missile. The idea that people are already lining up a narrative where if the midterms go bad, it's Candace's fault. And she's basically like, okay, and? Fact one, the moment Candace Owens stopped playing defense. At first, it looked like just another internet dust-up, the kind that flares up on a Tuesday and disappears by Thursday. Candace Owens had been mentioned, clipped, subtweeted, and vaguely blamed in the swirling aftermath of the Tim Pool drama. Nothing new, Candace Owens lives in that space. But this time, Candace Owens didn't rush to clarify, didn't soften the edges, didn't issue a careful statement wrapped in polite language and plausible deniability. Instead, Candace Owens waited, and that wait was loud. While commentators speculated timelines filled with assumptions and reaction channels warmed up their outrage engines, Candace Owens stayed quiet. The kind of quiet that feels less like avoidance and more like someone loading ammunition. Then, when Candace Owens finally spoke, the tone was different. Not defensive, not apologetic, calm, precise, almost amused, like someone who already knew how the story ended and was just deciding when to flip the page. And that's when people started getting uncomfortable, because Candace Owens didn't frame the situation as drama. Candace Owens framed it as a misrepresentation problem. Not, you hurt my feelings, but you told this story wrong. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about vibes or personalities or who yelled louder. It became about who said what first, who clipped what, and why certain details were suddenly missing. Candace Owens wasn't chasing Tim Pool's narrative. Candace Owens was quietly dismantling it, piece by piece, with the confidence of someone who had receipts but didn't need to wave them around. That's when timelines shifted, defenders hesitated, critics paused mid-tweet, because nothing rattles the internet faster than realizing the person you were supposed to dunk on is actually holding the flashlight and pointing it right back at the crowd. And just like that, what started as Candace Owens drama turned into something much worse for everyone involved. Candace Owens asking questions out loud and not blinking. The timeline didn't add up, and Candace Owens noticed immediately. Once Candace Owens stopped playing defense, the next move was almost surgical. Candace Owens went straight for the timeline, because here's the thing the internet always forgets. Vibes fade, outrage cools, but timestamps never lie. Candace Owens didn't argue emotion, Candace Owens argued sequence. Who spoke first? Who clipped what? Who responded after the fact, but acted like they were reacting in real time? And suddenly, the story everyone thought they understood started wobbling like a Jenga tower missing one crucial block. Candace Owens calmly pointed out that certain accusations didn't just feel exaggerated, they required time travel to be true. Reactions were framed as provocations, responses were labeled attacks, and moments that happened after were retroactively treated like causes. It was less miscommunication and more creative editing, and Candace Owens made sure to underline that difference without ever raising her voice. What made it even more uncomfortable was the tone. Candace Owens wasn't angry. Candace Owens sounded almost entertained, like someone watching a magician mess up their own trick, because once the timeline cracked, everything else followed. The moral outrage suddenly looked rehearsed. The pile-on started feeling premature, and the people who had confidently picked sides realized they might have been reacting to a remix, not the original track. Candace Owens didn't accuse anyone directly, which somehow made it worse. Instead, Candace Owens asked the kind of questions that make defenders sweat. If this happened first, why did that response already exist? If I was reacting, why does the clip show the opposite? And that's when the laughter stopped, because nothing kills online confidence faster than realizing the person you're arguing with isn't confused, they're chronological. And once Candace Owens exposed that the order of events didn't match the outrage, the drama stopped being loud and started being dangerously quiet. The victim card got played, while everyone else was taking the hits. This is the moment where Candace Owens stopped sounding defensive and started sounding surgical. Because while the internet was busy declaring winners and losers, Candace Owens pointed out something deeply inconvenient. The loudest cries of victimhood were coming from the person taking the least actual damage. No canceled platform, no silenced voice, no lost audience. Meanwhile, everyone else in the blast radius was catching strays. Sponsors nervous, audiences confused, reputations bruised. And yet somehow the narrative kept circling back to one person being under attack. Candace Owens didn't mock it outright. Candace Owens let the contrast do the work, because there's something almost comedic about watching someone stand on a digital megaphone speaking to millions while insisting they've been muzzled. It's like yelling, "I'm being silenced," through stadium speakers. The math just doesn't cooperate. And the suspense builds when Candace Owens zooms out and lets the audience connect the dots themselves. Who was actually dealing with real-world consequences? Who had people showing up at their homes? Who was quietly absorbing the chaos while another figure monetized the moment with perfectly timed uploads and dramatic framing? Candace Owens didn't accuse. Candace Owens juxtaposed. And suddenly the drama felt less like a moral crusade and more like performance art with a donation link. The humor here is dark because the realization hits late. The person claiming the most pain was somehow untouched, while others were left cleaning up the mess. That's when the audience starts shifting in their seats, because nobody wants to admit they cheered for the wrong underdog. And once Candace Owens exposed that imbalance, that the victim role was being worn like a costume instead of earned through consequence, the story stopped being about feelings and started being about credibility. When the allies went quiet and the silence got loud, this is the point in the story where Candace Owens didn't have to name names, because the absence did it for her. Suddenly, the usual chorus of online defenders went eerily quiet. No fiery quote tweets, no late night live stream defenses, no bold statements declaring loyalty, just silence. The kind of silence that feels intentional. Candace Owens framed it perfectly by highlighting how fast public alliances evaporate when the cost of defending someone gets higher than the clicks are worth. One week, everyone's brave. The next week, everyone's busy. And there's something darkly funny about watching people who built careers on being loud suddenly discover the beauty of restraint. Candace Owens didn't mock them. Candace Owens let the quiet expose them, because when the stakes rise, real loyalty doesn't whisper, and fake loyalty disappears completely. And here's where the suspense really tightens, because this wasn't just random silence, it was strategic distance. Candace Owens pointed out that people weren't denouncing anything, they were just stepping back, which is way more revealing. When allies don't defend, don't disagree, don't even clarify, it sends one message: we don't want to be attached to this when the dust settles. That's when the audience starts realizing this wasn't a two-person feud, it was a room full of people quietly calculating risk. Candace Owens didn't have to accuse anyone of betrayal. The pause did it for her, and the humor creeps in because the same voices that once demanded accountability suddenly found comfort in vagueness, posting neutral quotes and unrelated content like nothing was happening. It's almost theatrical, like watching extras leave the stage one by one, pretending they were never part of the scene. By the time Candace Owens finished laying this out, the message was unmistakable. When allies vanish without explanation, it's usually because they know something or they fear what's coming next. The moment damage control turned into a public meltdown. This is where Candace Owens made it clear that whatever strategy was happening behind the scenes had officially fallen apart in public, because instead of calm clarification, what followed looked a lot like panic wearing a confident outfit. Statements got longer, explanations got messier, and the tone shifted from "this is nothing" to "why are you still asking questions?" which is always the internet's equivalent of blood in the water. Candace Owens didn't even need to dramatize it. She just lined up the responses, pointed out the contradictions, and let the audience notice how every attempt to shut the conversation down somehow kept restarting it louder. And there's a certain dark humor in watching people insist something is over, while talking about it non-stop. That's not closure, that's anxiety with Wi-Fi. What really pushed this into suspense thriller territory was how every new response seemed to create two new problems. problems. Clarifications raised follow-up questions. Denials required footnotes. And silence, when it finally arrived, landed way too late to look innocent. Candace Owens framed it like watching someone frantically patch a leaking boat while drilling new holes at the same time. The more energy spent controlling the narrative, the more obvious it became that the narrative was controlling them, and the humor creeps in because viewers can feel it. That moment when public figures realize the audience isn't confused anymore. They're paying attention. By the end of this phase, Candace Owens didn't need to accuse anyone of lying or scheming. The overcorrections told the story themselves. When damage control looks louder than the original controversy, it stops being protection and starts looking like fear of what might still come out. When silence became the loudest answer, this is the moment Candace Owens didn't need new receipts, new clips, or new accusations, because the silence did the talking for her. After days of noise, outrage, counter rants, and dramatic positioning, something changed. The responses slowed. The statements stopped evolving. The energy shifted from aggressive certainty to careful avoidance. And if you've ever watched a public controversy long enough, you know exactly what that means. Silence isn't peace, it's triage. Candace Owens framed it like watching a room suddenly go quiet after someone asked the question nobody rehearsed for. No outrage, no clapback, just an awkward pause that felt heavier than any rant that came before it. What made this moment deliciously tense and unintentionally funny was how obvious the shift felt to viewers. The same people who couldn't stop talking suddenly had nothing to say. The same confidence evaporated into strategic quiet, and Candace Owens didn't chase it. She let it hang there like an unanswered text message that everyone can see was read. The suspense came from realizing this wasn't about winning an argument anymore. It was about minimizing damage. When public figures go silent after insisting nothing is wrong, the internet doesn't assume innocence. It assumes lawyers entered the chat, and that's where the humor sharpens into something darker, because silence at this stage isn't calm, it's containment. By the end of Fact 6, Candace Owens positioned the situation like a chessboard after a bad move. No explosions, no shouting, just pieces frozen in place while everyone recalculates. The audience didn't need instructions on what to think. The absence of response did it for them, and that's the suspenseful brilliance of this moment. The drama didn't escalate louder, it collapsed inward. Viewers weren't watching a fight anymore. They were watching people decide what not to say next. And once a controversy reaches that stage, it never really ends. It just waits, quietly, for the next leak, the next slip, or the next person brave enough to break the silence first. The aftermath. Nobody planned for. By the time Fact 7 rolls around, the drama has already burned through outrage, rebuttals, and silence. And what's left is something far more uncomfortable. Consequences without closure. Candace Owens framed this stage like the morning after a party that got way out of hand. No music, no shouting, just a room full of people stepping over broken glass pretending nothing happened. Careers didn't collapse overnight, but something shifted permanently. Trust became conditional. Alliances felt thinner. Statements that once sounded confident now needed footnotes, clarifications, and what I really meant was energy. And the humor here comes from how everyone suddenly acts brand new, like the internet doesn't have receipts, timestamps, and a terrifying memory. What made this phase suspenseful wasn't a new bombshell. It was the slow realization that nobody could put the toothpaste back in the tube. Viewers started noticing tiny changes. Who stopped collaborating? Who changed tone? Who avoided certain names like they were cursed objects in a horror movie? Candace Owens leaned into that tension without shouting about it, letting the audience connect dots the size of billboards. It felt like watching a chess game where nobody announces checkmate, but everyone knows the board is tilted. The laughter came from the sheer awkwardness, the forced professionalism, the stiff smiles, the sudden love for moving on narratives. Nothing screams unresolved drama like people insisting they're done talking about it while adjusting everything around it. By the end of Fact 7, the suspense wasn't about what happened anymore. It was about what happens next, because this is the phase where stories don't explode, they ferment, where every future disagreement gets filtered through this moment, whether anyone admits it or not. Candace Owens positioned it like a shadow that keeps showing up in unrelated rooms, never speaking, never leaving. And that's what makes Fact 7 so effective. No villain monologue, no tidy ending, just the unsettling understanding that reputations don't reset, narratives don't disappear, and the internet never forgets who flinched first. The screen fades out not with a bang, but with a question mark. And honestly, that's way more dangerous. The long-term fallout nobody is admitting yet. Fact 8 is where the drama stops being loud and starts being structural. No more viral clips, no more explosive quotes, just quiet recalibration. Candace Owens framed this phase like watching people subtly rearrange furniture after a small earthquake while insisting the house is totally fine. Nobody announces consequences, but everyone behaves like they're accounting for them. Invitations quietly stop coming. Collaborations suddenly don't make sense right now. Public praise gets replaced with neutral silence, the most aggressive move in internet politics. And the humor here is deliciously dry. The same voices that once thrived on confrontation suddenly rediscover nuance, context, and the beauty of changing the subject. What makes Fact 8 suspenseful is that it's not about punishment. It's about reputation gravity. Once a narrative cracks, it doesn't shatter evenly. It pulls everything nearby slightly off course. Candace Owens hinted that the real damage wasn't who yelled the loudest, but who hesitated, who froze, who recalculated mid-sentence. Audiences began rewatching old clips differently, like rereading a text after you find out what happened later. Innocent pauses now feel loaded. Old confidence suddenly looks rehearsed. And the comedy comes from watching people act like the audience didn't just level up, as if viewers didn't notice the tonal shifts, the safer language, the sudden obsession with misinterpretation. Nothing screams fallout louder than people talking around something they used to talk through. By the time Fact 8 fully settles in, the suspense flips direction. It's no longer who was right, it's who adjusted first, because that's who usually felt the pressure earliest. Candace Owens treated this phase like a slow motion reveal, letting time do the exposing instead of receipts. And that's where the humor sharpens into irony. The loudest voices fade, the quiet ones gain influence, and everyone pretends this was always the plan. Fact 8 doesn't end the story, it locks it into future conversations, quietly haunting every panel, collaboration, and disagreement that follows. The real twist: no apology tour, no final statement, just a new normal shaped by something nobody wants to name out loud. And somehow that makes it way more unsettling and way more entertaining. The moment the audience realized they were part of the story, Fact 9 is the quiet panic that sets in when people realize this drama wasn't just something they were watching, it was something they were participating in. Candace Owens framed this like a late night realization that hits after the adrenaline wears off. The clips, the reactions, the quote tweets, the "I'm just asking questions" comments. All of it added fuel. Suddenly, viewers weren't neutral observers anymore. They were unpaid extras in a very online psychological thriller. The humor here is almost cruel. People who swore they don't care about internet drama had watched 6 hours of content, memorized timelines, and developed strong opinions about people they've never met. That's not casual viewing or rakas. That's emotional investment with snacks. What made Fact 9 suspenseful was the shift in tone. Candace Owens didn't accuse the audience, she mirrored them. She talked like someone gently sliding a mirror across the table and letting everyone notice their own reflection. The laughs come from recognition, realizing you knew the backstory better than your own email password, realizing you could explain the feud faster than the people actually involved. And the tension builds when viewers start asking themselves uncomfortable questions. Why did this matter so much? Why did this feel personal? Why did I pick a side before all the facts existed? That's when the story stops being entertainment and turns into something stickier, a collective experience no one wants to admit they enjoyed this much. By the end of Fact 9, the suspense flips inward. The real cliffhanger isn't about Candace Owens, Tim Pool, or anyone else. It's about what happens the next time a similar story drops, because now the audience knows the pattern. They know how quickly narratives form, how easily humor becomes hostility, how fast just commentary turns into digital mob energy. And the irony is delicious. Everyone claims they want truth, but what they crave is momentum. Fact 9 lands like a slow smile at the camera, the kind that says you're not innocent, but you're not guilty either. You're just human. And once you realize that, there's no going back to watching these stories the same way again. The ending that was never meant to be an ending. Fact 10 is where the story quietly admits it's not done with anyone yet, because this isn't a scandal, it's a cycle wearing different outfits. The humor creeps in first, like a nervous laugh at a horror movie when the villain is clearly not dead. Everyone declares final thoughts, uploads the last take, promises to move on, and then immediately refreshes their feed. Candace Owens frames this moment like a knowing pause, the kind where the music fades but the room gets louder, because the real suspense isn't what happened, it's what happens next. next. The pattern is familiar. Outrage spikes, sides harden, clips get weaponized, nuance evaporates, and suddenly everyone is a full-time expert with a podcast voice and a verdict. The funny part is how predictable it all is. The unsettling part is how nobody stops it. Fact 10 lands as a wink and a warning at the same time. Because once you've seen how narratives are built in real time, you can't unsee it. The laughter comes from recognition, the tension from inevitability. This won't be the last feud, the last fallout, or the last this changes everything moment. It's just the most recent episode in an infinite series where attention is the currency, certainty is optional, and the audience always swears this time they won't get pulled in right before they do. So now I want to hear from you. Was Candace Owens exposing hypocrisy or fueling division? Did Tim Pool react out of principle or pressure? And is this drama about truth or control? Drop your take in the comments. If this breakdown made you rethink the narrative, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because this story is still unfolding and the next chapter won't be quiet.